At T.REX Arms, we believe in the Second Amendment, but it's clear that not everyone means the same thing when they say that. Many people will say they believe in it, but they don't believe that it protects the right to keep and bear something like this, military weapons. It's not for weapons, only for other types of firearms. What we mean is this. We believe that it recognizes a pre-existing individual right to keep and bear weapons, specifically weapons. In the Second Amendment, the key word is arms. The right is to keep and bear arms. Our founding fathers were intelligent men, and when they chose the word arms, they chose it deliberately. If they had wanted to protect something else, like tools for hunting, they would have said that. But they said arms. If we look at dictionaries, like for example, Samuel Johnson's 1755 dictionary, we start to see a pattern for how the word arms is defined at the time. Johnson says that arms are weapons of offense or armor of defense. John Trussler's 1794 lexicon says, "By arms we understand those instruments of offense generally made use of in war, such as firearms, swords." Noah Webster's 1828 defines it, "Weapons of offense or armor for defense and protection of the body." Is it just me, or does it sound like what they're describing is assault weapons and body armor? I think we can understand why the Founding Fathers took this so seriously if we understand their immediate historic context. They had just come out of a massive war against Great Britain. Against all odds, they had prevailed and gained their independence. The tipping point that had led to the war, that had led to their independence, was April 19th, 1775. On that day, British forces marched out of Boston in an attempt to capture weapons and munitions owned by the militias and stored at Concord. However, thanks to Paul Revere and other men, the militias had been warned in advance, and they mustered in great numbers, confronted the British force, and they thrashed it all the way back to Boston. Now, these men that came out, they were not part of some state defense force or something like that. These were regular men, and they were controlled, their militias were controlled at a local level. They were very autonomous from the Massachusetts government and from the British government. And I think that's why the British government was so eager to confiscate their weapons and specifically their cannons. At Lexington and at Concord, thousands of Americans confronted the British, and they confronted them putting their lives on the line in order to defend a right that they considered to be sacred. Dozens and dozens of them died. Is it really possible that the American leaders would have forgotten all this when they put pen to paper and wrote our Bill of Rights? The Americans that bled and died to give us our freedom didn't just wake up one day and go, "We love our guns. In fact, we love them enough to die for them." And our lawmakers didn't just invent a new right out of a vacuum. They were building on something, and that something was English common law. If you go back through English history, you will find a series of laws that either mandated or protected the right of men to keep and bear weapons. The earliest I'm aware of is the Assize of Arms of 1181. It required that all free men arm themselves with a gambeson, an iron cap, and a lance. In other words, cheap body armor and a basic infantry weapon. If you were more wealthy, you had to acquire nicer weapons. Interestingly, there was a date placed on when you had to have these, and, quote, "vengeance, not merely on lands or chattels, but on their limbs, would be imposed if you failed to acquire those weapons by that set date." But most interestingly is one of the last clauses, quote, "And henceforth no one having these arms shall sell them or pledge them or lend them or alienate them in any other way, nor shall a lord in any way alienate them from his men, either through forfeiture or through gift or through pledge or in any other way." This is like the Second Amendment on steroids. You have to be armed, and under no circumstance can anyone take your weapons from you, and nor are you to allow them to be taken from you. And it's not the only law like this. There's the Assize of Arms of 1252, there's the Statute of Winchester of 1285, and then there's a series of archery laws that were passed. The one in 1511, for example, required that fathers provide their sons with bows and arrows starting at age 7 and teach them how to shoot. It was these English laws that provided the legal context for our Bill of Rights. But we don't have to just look at the English legal context to understand the Bill of Rights. 6 months, just 6 months after the Bill of Rights was ratified, Congress passed two laws, the First and Second Militia Acts of 1792. The first one authorized the president to call up the militia, and the second one is going to sound very familiar. I'm going to abridge it. That every free, able-bodied white male citizen between 18 and 45 years old shall be enrolled in the militia. That every citizen shall, within 6 months, provide himself with a good musket or firelock, a sufficient bayonet and belt, 2 spare flints, a knapsack, a pouch, and a box therein to contain not less than 24 cartridges. This is basically the Assize of Arms of 1181 all over again. It has basically all the main points. Free men, acquire weapons, keep them in readiness. Now the law got updated through American history because this was the law on the books until 1903. In the 1870s, for example, the law was made inclusive of black men. And if the law had continued to be updated, if the law had kept going beyond 1903, I believe eventually we would have seen these on there. Military-grade semi-automatic rifles, load-bearing equipment, a certain number of magazines and cartridges. Fundamentally, the debate about gun control is not about crime, it's about power. As Mao said, all power proceeds out of the barrel of a gun. The debate is who controls that power. What is the relationship between the people and the government? Are the people subjugated to the government because the government has all the power? Or is the government subservient to the people because ultimately the people keep the majority of the military power in the country? The gun control debate also looks at the question of the role of government or the power of government. Does it contain within itself the power to make any law at all whatsoever? Or are there fundamental, inherent limitations? Are there rights given by God that the state must never under any circumstance cross? But ultimately, we believe that the Second Amendment is clear. The Founding Fathers wanted to protect this right to keep and bear arms because they wanted the political power inherent in large numbers of military-grade small arms to rest with the citizens, not with the federal government.